everyone, and welcome back to The Doctor Will See You Now. I hope everyone is involved in great reads. I hope you are discovering new authors. I hope you are enjoying returning to authors that you may be familiar with. If you are watching this when the recording first goes out, well, we're summer 2022 and there are some tremendous reads coming out. Today's author and their book is no exception whatsoever. Although we're going to do crime and thrillers with a wee twist of the supernatural, the paranormal, the otherworldly. Well, let's see what comes out as we get into discussion. It is with great pleasure I'd like to welcome into the consultation room C.S. Green. Hello, C.S. Green, or should we say Caroline? We can see your name, so it's great to have you with us. Thank you so much for being here. How's everything with you?
Thank you so much for having me. I was just saying I've been at Harrogate Book Festival and then teaching a summer school today, so I'm a little bit croaky, so you'll have to forgive my croaky voice.
We will, and because it's a consultation, we will be gentle. But we are, we're just thrilled to be able to talk to you about your latest book, which is The Whisper House. And quite appropriate, really. Then maybe the voice is a manifestation.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Of the novel. Who knows? Just to say that, of course, C.S. Green is your pseudonym, but you write other things as well, do you not? I believe that you also write books for children under your name, Caroline Green, and that you also teach creative writing at City University in London.
Yeah, this is what I've been doing today. I also, it's a bit confusing being me because I've actually got three names.
Oh, what's the third one?
I go by Caroline, just in the world and for children's fiction. And I wrote psychological thrillers and may still do as Cass Green. Yeah. So that's my other name. And I do the Rose Gifford series as C.S. Green. So it's very confusing.
Right. Well, then, this is a great moment because I always, when authors do this, and it's great because it's almost like we get three authors for the price of one. When authors write either different series or different genre. So I'd love to ask you, for yourself, having those different author names, what does that mean for you?
In some ways, I think it would be nice just to have the one name for everything, but it's kind of the way things evolve. So I started out writing YA fiction. I wrote four YA novels as Caroline Green, and then I wanted to make a change to writing adult thrillers. And I didn't think it would be. I didn't really want because I wrote quite young YA. Excuse me. I didn't really want 12, 13-year-olds reading my adult fiction, thinking it was going to be in the same kind of stable. Yeah. So, funnily enough, I suggested initials. I suggested C.S. Green to my then editor, and she said, "Oh, well, we're sort of finding that female names are selling thrillers," which I thought was interesting. She said, "So actually, could you come up with another name, female name?" So I said, "Oh, okay, no problem." And she said, "There's no rush if you could do it by tomorrow." I was like, "What?"
Loads of time.
I was absolutely panic-stricken. So I was desperately trying to think of things, and I knew I had to keep it close to my real name because I just knew that I'd forget. I'd be at a crime festival and somebody would say, "Hello, Doris," or something, and I would be completely like, "Who?"
It's like, no, I'm not Doris. So, oh no, wait a minute, yes, I am.
I just wouldn't be able to keep up with it. So growing up in my family, I was always Kaz, and Kaz Freer works perfectly as a name, but Kaz Green is a bit so I thought Cass is close to Kaz, so I came up with Cass Green for those books. But the series that I'm writing now is this police procedural series. It's a different beast, really, to the psychological thriller. So we felt like we wanted it to have a sort of different kind of brand of its own, really. So then came full circle and came back around to the C.S. Green again. So I suppose it's quite handy for differentiating between the different books that I write. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Just thinking, so, okay, it's, it acts as that pointer as to, you'll find me writing in these different styles. For you, writing in those different styles, is that exciting? I mean, do you enjoy, different manifestations of yourself on the page?
I do. I think I've got a very short attention span, and I get bored very quickly, like almost like a child. And for me, it keeps me excited about what I'm doing, to be able to write different things. So when I was writing the first in the police procedural series, very dark serial killer novel, with a supernatural element to it. What was a lovely thing was then writing my book for 7 to 9 year olds about a boy and a dog swapping bodies,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And I didn't do them at the same time. I could never do that. I think I would go crazy if I tried to, split myself in half that way. But I finished one and then moved on to the other, and it was it was like a palate cleanser, really, to work on different things. Yeah, and so I feel as though now I'm hoping to write another Cass Green novel. I feel makes me cringe to talk about myself in the third person, but another one of the psychological thrillers under that name. And again, that feels like that's a slightly different beast again to what I've just been doing with the series. So I think it's quite helpful, actually, I think, for me.
Yeah, thank you, for that. Just that sort of like telling us about you and you as a writer, and just different aspects of your craft. Now, the Whisper House. Viewers, listeners, do get hold of a copy of this. Because whether you are the kind of reader or listener who enjoys that fusion of genre, shall we call it, this is such a cracker of a book. Oh, honestly, and just the way that Rose and the team work together, that's one beautiful part of it. It again, it's a procedural with a bit of a difference, which I think is great. It's a nice, if you're somebody like myself who enjoys a good police procedural, this just gives you that with a different aspect to it. So I think that's good. Yeah. But I think, Caroline, the way that you create the characters in the house and around the house was something that I thoroughly enjoyed.
Thank you.
The idea of a street where people live, and this could be any street in that kind of area with that conglomeration of people, and yet the darkness that hides there, the pain as well, that finds its way out in certain ways. I just thought, and I'm going shivery talking about it. So I always think,
great.
I always think it's a good sign. If I
good.
get the goosebumps, it's a good sign. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Second book in the series. The first one being, as you said, Sleep Tight. How did this behave as a second book? Because some authors talk about, it was a bit of a beast to wrangle with. How was it for you?
Yeah, at first it was. At first it felt like a very different experience. So the first book, I pretty much wrote it on spec because I knew I wanted to have a go at doing this, and big changes were happening at my publisher. When my editor was leaving, somebody new was coming in. There was a big period of change over a summer holiday when people just weren't available to make decisions about things. And I pitched the idea, not thinking anyone would want this supernatural thriller. I pitched it to my publisher, and they said, well, can we just have a bit of time to think about it? And it just dragged on and on and on. In the meantime, we had a bit of a rotten summer, actually, because my father-in-law passed away, and my mother-in-law had an awful accident, fell over and broke her hip. And our holiday got cancelled, and my husband was having to travel to see family the whole time. And I ended up with, just my children are quite big now, all this time. And I thought, well, I'll just finish it. I'll just write it. And there was a tremendous feeling of freedom because I didn't know if it would get picked up. I hoped it would, but I didn't allow myself to get too frightened about how weird and different and out there it was when I was writing the first draft of it. When I was then under contract for 3 books, and I came to write the second one, at first I was completely paralyzed by wanting to get it right and how I was going to continue the world building that I started and all those kind of things. And then I'm always banging on about the Stephen King book on writing. And there are so many gems in there, and there are so many things in there that I've thought they seem sensible, but at a certain point they really resonate, and you get it more than you've ever got it before. And for me, it was his advice to write the first book, the first draft with the door closed, and the second draft with the door open. And I thought about what that meant, and that meant not thinking about the readers, my editor, my agent, figures, any of those things, rediscovering that kind of joy I felt when I wrote the first book. Yeah, and it was, I somehow made that work. And actually, I think I ended up enjoying writing The Whisper House almost more than the first one in the end. I really loved writing it. It's one of my favorites, I think, that I've written. I don't normally say that because people always ask, especially school children in schools, will say, what's your favorite book? And I say, oh, I can't say that because it's like choosing between my children. But I actually genuinely do love The Whisper House. So, but yeah, I think I just threw myself into the first draft of, okay, I'm not going to think about any of those things. And for me, that helped me sort of turn the corner and get it all, get it to flow.
I love as well the fact that, knowing, the world of education and passing ideas on to, to learners. I love how you yourself have taken on advice there. I very often, it's easy to tell, well, you should try this and you should do that, and don't worry, and give this a go. But then to actually say, no, wait a minute, I'm going to take this on board. And to be able to say at the end of the process, because there is the book in its glorious published form, it worked. That absolutely. Advice worked. Yeah.
And honestly, the day that I feel that I don't need to learn new things and to take advice is the day I'm going to stop writing. Because I think that's it.
But I also think, as someone who is teaching others, I think that's so important to say, I'm never done. I'm never done learning myself, because that passing things on to other people, that you remain fresh, that you've got lots of ideas swirling around. So for anybody who is not familiar with the world of DC Rose Gifford and the team, could you just give us a little bit of background to who she is and how they function together, the different characters?
Absolutely. So in the first book, Rose is a fairly commonplace Met policewoman working on a murder squad. She has had a very unconventional upbringing, which she's incredibly ashamed of and doesn't really tell anyone about, where she grew up looked after, in a very loose sense, by her grandmother, who she called Mother, who was a medium, but she was a complete fraud. It was all to do with sort of money laundering, and she was just a complete fraud, and she just fleeced grieving people for money. Rose hated this whole world that she was forced to live in. But Rose did have abilities, and if her grandmother had ever found out, she would have been making her work. She just ignored them. She would hear something in the corner when certain people came to visit. She would see something passing in front of her eyes, and she just grew to just pretend it didn't happen, because she didn't want that to be the case. She thought joining the police would be the opposite of this. It would be like something clean and with rules and structure, and totally different. And in the first book, we find her investigating the case of a serial killer who is targeting people who have a strange sleep disorder. They can't work out how the killer is finding these people, how he's stalking them before he kills them, how he's getting into their physical space. She discovers that they get offered some help from an unlikely source, which at first she's appalled exists. And it's a branch of the Met called UCIT. I call it UCIT. And it's the Uncharted Crimes Investigation Team, led by the indomitable DS Sheila Mooney, who's a bit of a character. And they, as the name suggests, they investigate uncharted crimes. So it's anything that's a little bit weird, supernatural, doesn't fit the parameters of our general belief system. Anyway, Rose has to end up working with the team, and by the end of the book, she becomes part of that team. So in the Whisper House, she's working at UCIT. She's not sure she's made the right decision, still feeling a little bit torn between these two aspects of herself, still doesn't really quite let on to her colleagues anything to do with her upbringing, but she brings something unusual to the investigation.
So, because I loved it at the start of the novel, she's thinking back to the previous people that she's worked with and what they meant to her. So there's there's that beautiful, but now she's working with a new set of people. You mentioned Sheila Mooney. I love the fact that she got herself a motorcycle and she arrives in leathers and everything. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Wonderful. There's also the hint that Rose might carry a bit of a torch for her new partner.
Yes, she does. And she knows that she feels it could never go anywhere. He's a little bit older, not a huge amount older than her, but he's divorced. He's got 2 daughters that are his whole world. And she finds it very hard to kind of let people in because she doesn't want to have to tell them about her upbringing, because it's such a source of shame, and and she's living in this horrible house that she's grown up in all her life. She feels that if she regularly sees Adele, who is the grandmother, sitting in a ratty old fur coat, sitting in the living room and sometimes in the kitchen, silently washing dishes, and just very spooky. And she has this horrible feeling that if she is to leave that childhood home, the ghost might just come with her, and that's almost more than she can handle. So she's got kind of stuck. For a young woman who's only 30, she's kind of in this position of being quite stuck where she is in her life, and so letting somebody new in is a bit frightening, I think.
But I loved that aspect to the book, that sense of unrequited because it's unknown, but that but that's still it being something so special to her, but not be able to talk about it. I liked that. So the house, can I ask, the house here, the Whisper House, is the house developed on fact or fiction?
Completely 100% fiction. I completely made it up. I don't know what the original inspiration was, but for some reason, as soon as I came up with 42 Wyndham Terrace as my address, I could just see this house. I used to live in Kentish Town, where the house is. I don't live there now. I live a bit further out in the suburbs now. I lived in Kentish Town for quite a long time. And it's one of those areas of North London where you really can have an absolute mansion, not very far away from somewhere quite run down. So I think that's the thing about North London. It's very, different neighbourhoods so close together. And so this Victorian house that was really a bit shabby and it hadn't been decorated in a very, very long time, just really appealed to me. And for some reason, I could see that house so vividly. Sometimes I struggle with this and I have to find pictures of places, and I just literally look on, property websites and look for descriptions of places because I can't quite see them. Never had to do that with Wyndham Terrace. It just, I could smell that house and the people in it,
Yeah. And again, for anybody, who has been following this series, I always, you might think of me like a broken record at this point, with a scratch across it, but I am convinced that there are stories that want to be told, and that is why this house was there for you to describe, and you didn't need to look for it, and you didn't, because it was just waiting to now tell this story.
I like this. I like that. Have you read the Elizabeth Gilbert book, Big Magic?
No, I haven't.
Oh, you must read that. She talks about this a lot.
Okay, Big Magic.
Yeah, I'm always raving about that book. It's marvelous. And she talks about, it's all about creativity and ideas and where they come from. And that's exactly what she says. And there's an amazing anecdote in there where she had the exact same idea down to the names of characters with, I can't remember who, it was another quite famous author actually, but a friend of hers. And they met at a conference and they realized they were writing the same book and they'd had no conversation.
There'd been no discussion.
Yeah. And she ended up abandoning hers, not because she was too put off, but I think it was more that I think her husband had a health crisis or something, and
Mhm.
it went on the back burner, and then she didn't feel the pull of it anymore. But yeah, I like that theory.
Yeah,
There was something in it.
yeah. And I wondered as well, that because of that supernatural aspect, again, what was swirling around at the time when you were writing this? And do you have a sixth sense? I mean, are you gifted in any way?
No, no, I have absolutely nothing like that. And to be honest with you, for some reason, I love ghost stories and
Mhm.
haunted houses. I just can't resist stories like that. I'm just always drawn to them. But the funny thing is, I always think the best way of summing this up is I don't really believe in that sort of thing, yet I'm still very scared of it. So there was no amount of money you could pay me to go and do one of those things where you stay overnight and
Yeah,
nothing.
in a
Because my
haunted
imagination
castle.
is so ridiculous. It's so ridiculous, my imagination, that I'd have to be airlifted out of there on a stretcher, honestly. It would be, it would be terrible. So it's all just really imagination. I think that's the thing, all bubbles away in there.
Yeah.
But no, I don't think I do have a sixth sense.
Well, let's talk then about your amazing imagination and how it has come out onto the page uh, with the Whisper House. Tell us about 42 Wyndham Terrace again, within the parameters of not giving too much away. But what is the setup around the novel?
Okay, so there's a family of three living there called the Fullers. Gwen and Anton are the parents, and Gregory is the son, who's 10. And Gwen is a very sort of nervous, sort of fussy sort of woman, and Anton is a very boorish man. He's the
Mhm.
he's a senior teacher at a totally made up school, but it's basically meant to be based on somewhere like Latimer School or something like that, like a really top class, hard to get into school in London. And he's an awful pompous man. They've been having what looks on the surface like disputes with neighbours over noises and banging and things being thrown around and all this. And Gregory, the slightly odd 10-year-old boy, who's a little bit disconcerting when you meet him at first, claims that there's something going on in the house and it's a ghost or a poltergeist that's causing it. His father will not hear of this at all. But it starts to emerge that maybe there's a target. There's one person in the house who's a target of this potentially violent haunting. I won't say any more about that.
Yeah.
But so quite quickly, Rose and Adam, her colleague, go to meet them just because they're told might be something there in this case. Rose immediately can tell that there's something, as she puts it, there's something very wrong about 42 Wyndham Terrace. And it develops from there.
Mm. I think we can talk about this scene because it happens early on in the book, and I don't think it gives anything away. But I loved it where Rose is there and looking around I think it's the sitting room or the living room, looking at photographs, and the eyes have been cut out of the father and the
All
family
the photos.
portraits, and they're like, oh.
Very neatly as well.
Yes, of course,
Very
yeah,
neatly.
very
Almost like a
neatly.
human hand couldn't do it so neatly.
Yeah. Oh, because it's the same thing with the daffodils, isn't it? The way the
Yeah.
daffodils have been cut in the garden, that such precision of the cutting.
Yeah. All the
Um,
heads have been chopped off and they've been laid out almost like a wreath in the
yeah,
garden.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
yeah.
had such fun coming up with all that. I really did.
But also then the neighbours, and how the neighbours are like, oh, and I think anybody reading the book who's had that kind of neighbour dispute, shall we say, or the neighbours who are really difficult to understand, there's just that recognition there of poor, poor people, who for one reason or another.
Mm.
But again, I think the way you present us with what on the one side of this can seem like, just the neighbours from hell, and on the other side there's something else going on. You know, what seems just like everyday pain in the neck kind of people to, oh, yeah. And
Something's
again,
something's not right there.
As I always would say, something is very wrong. The fusion for you, making this fusion, what I like to call this alchemy between, you know, a police procedural and then, you know, the supernatural thriller, the twist to the thriller. Is it very calculated for you how you put this together, or do you let these elements just blend themselves?
Well, that's a good question. It's hard to answer it. I mean, I never really, at the very beginning, with this the idea that I had for Sleep Tight, with the sleep disorders and the targeting people and the nightmares and things. When I first came up with the very basic idea for it, I've told this story a lot, but I've got a friend called Emma Horton who wrote The Dark, which is an amazing book set in Antarctica. She's one of my good writing friends, and I told her about it, and she wrote back and she said, "Oh, it sounds good, but I don't know how you'll handle the supernatural aspect." And I thought, well, she's completely misunderstood. I don't know what she means supernatural. That's not at all what I was doing. And I'll never forget this. That night, I was getting into bed, and my husband was away. My son was downstairs. And I literally got into bed, and I suddenly thought, what if it was supernatural? And it felt like I got the most unbelievable adrenaline surge. And I lay there all night wide awake thinking about this. Like my brain was going crazy. And I got so excited. And the next day I said to my agent, "You're going to think this is completely mad." And he was like, "Well, I like the sound of it. Start working something up." And then, as I say, that, you know, in the end, people did want it. But originally, I didn't think I was allowed to do it or something weird. So it's calculated in that I know that there has to be that aspect. So to some extent, I do have to think about it. And it's quite tricky. It's quite tricky to come up with scenarios where it's the right blend of supernatural fitting in with UCIT. And I did for book 3, I had to abandon 10,000 words I'd written, which was
ouch.
It was so painful. I had an idea that was so out there, and my agent and editor said, "Well, we have every faith that you can carry it off if you believe in it." And I did, and then I didn't. I didn't. I lost faith in it, and I just had to ditch it because it was really out there.
Okay.
It might have been too much of a stretch, I think, for people's tolerance of the supernatural aspect. Because I never really set out to do anything like the amazing Ben Aronovich books, the Rivers of London series, because this is not fantasy in that sense. I really very much want it to be a sort of gritty police procedural. With, you know, and I think for me the TV program Unforgotten is how I picture it. But with weirdy stuff. Unforgotten with weirdy stuff. They could put that on the cover, couldn't they?
I like that. Ask your publisher, does that work?
I'm going to suggest that.
But because there are some authors, and you know, again, do you fall into this category who say, well, I like to pose the notion that it could be otherworldly, it could be supernatural, but in the end, it all gets tied up to be.
No, that's I do like books like that, but no, that's not what in mine. I set my stall out. It's definitely not of this world, the stuff that happens. I mean, that might be a bit spoilery for the first book because you are supposed to wonder a little bit. But I mean, I think even on the back of the book, it talks about supernatural crimes division and so on. But I think that approach is really interesting, and I'm quite drawn to books that do that. But no, in my case, it's definitely it's not this world.
And it's what and it's something that I really appreciate, that sense of, it takes us that little bit further, the sense of, we love crime fiction, we love the mysteries, the puzzles, the whodunit, and this just adds another beautiful layer.
That's what I'm hoping for. Just something a bit different, so that you feel you're not getting you're getting something different to the
It's
rest of the
another
book.
dimension. I'm just thinking it's another dimension because, you know, Rose is doing the investigation as, you know, as she set out doing in book one. She was just doing the job as you would, and then something crops up that makes her realize actually that gift that you've got, well, it,
Yeah.
you know, and so on into book two, and it's, you know, it's that her investigation takes it into another realm, and I think that's
Yeah.
the thing.
And it's
Yeah.
painful for her. It's actually she's having to use a side of herself that she's been in denial about all her life, you know. So it's a really quite a painful process, and it hasn't got any easier even by book three. She's still a little bit
She's
struggling
still
against
yeah.
this. Yeah.
And yet, you know, there seems, you know, that sense of a connection that there is, or a recognition that's between her and Gregory.
Yes.
You know, or a sympathy that's there, what she, you know, what she feels for this little boy beyond,
Yes.
you know, the typical investigation.
Yes. I think there's a recognition. She can see that there's something going on for him. But the thing with Gregory is that they're not entirely sure what he is doing, what role Gregory's playing in all this, because he doesn't seem quite straightforward either. So that's another aspect, is that he's quite a creepy little boy.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Yeah, so that's he's trying to work out, is it just that he's haunted in some way, or is he doing something here, you know? So that there's that whole aspect as well.
Do you think that Rose, as an investigator, let's say in the three-dimension world, how do you rate her as an officer, an investigator? You know, despite, and let's face it, and we don't need to give anything away if people haven't read the first book, but she does go through something quite unpleasant in that first book. How do you feel about her as a police officer?
Yeah, I think she's quite a damaged character who really could do with quite a bit of therapy, actually. Not least because of her childhood, but also because of what happens in book one. She's really got PTSD in the second book after that experience. She has made some bad decisions in the past when her previous boss in her murder investigation team had other reasons for disliking her as well, but partly Rose a couple of times went slightly outside of it, but she's not a maverick in that way. She's genuinely made some mistakes and just been very human. And I think that's the thing for me. I want her to just to come across as a really believable human being. You know, she gets things wrong, but she can make some very good calls in this investigation too. And I never wanted her to be the person that came up with every solution to things.
Yeah.
I've heard that as a criticism I've seen of other books. I don't think it actually bothers me that much, but I've definitely seen readers complaining about that. So I actually tried very hard not for it to be that Rose comes up with all the answers all the time. It's very much a team, you know, but obviously she's our main focus.
Yeah. Did she emerge to you as a character out of nowhere, or did you pick up on this kind of character in things that you'd read?
To be honest, what often happens with me is that I'll see somebody on telly and I'll think, oh, she's interesting. I think that's my character. And for me, that it was Jessie Buckley, the Northern Irish actress who's brilliant in everything. And maybe it was a connection with the name Rose, but I don't know if you've seen that movie Wild Rose, where she's the Scottish singer.
Yes.
Brilliant, brilliant film. And that's just how she looks in my mind. So she's kind of because she's slightly merged now with, I don't know if I can't remember the actress's name. She's very good. I don't know if you watched Peaky Blinders at all. Did you watch Peaky Blinders?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Who is Esme in Peaky Blinders? She looks like Rose as well. That actress. She was in The Detectorists as well.
Yeah.
So there's a very specific, she just looks, I can see her. And when I can see the character, they just the rest all just starts to fall into place. But I need to know what they look like. Some people don't. I know some authors don't particularly.
Yeah, that's something. A couple of authors that I've spoken with who've said, it doesn't matter
Yeah,
what the character looks like, and I'm not going to tell you in the way that I write what this character looks like. It's up to your imagination.
yeah, yeah,
You go with it, and it's interesting, isn't it? Or because again, because I'd like us to talk about on page and screen if we can, because when if you watch something, there's no doubt about what the character looks like.
yeah,
We're given that, as opposed to in a book, there's more leeway there for us to create that protagonist.
yeah. I think it is. I think it is different for me. The visual part is really important, and coming back, yeah, again, Stephen King. But I love that thing he says about how description begins in the writer's imagination and finishes in the reader's. So it's almost like you create something that they then take away, and they then can do all the amazing special effects and bring it into proper three-dimensional color, and they can do all that in their own imagination. And I think if you give people just enough for them to create those images, whether it's your setting, description generally, what characters look like, for me, I love that idea that they can see their version of that character.
Yeah, it's a beautiful transference, isn't it? And because that every reader is individual, it's almost if we could then project what we see, and that just that similarity, and but then the difference between what we create from your idea.
Yeah, it's amazing to think that people might be carrying around completely different pictures in their heads, but I don't think I'd want them to stray too far with things like the house. This is what it looks like.
Yeah. I was struck by the burgundy wallpaper.
No.
Yeah.
Creepy wallpaper.
I could feel that. I was just like, okay. We were talking about page and screen, and I just wondered, we talked about not saying what's your favorite, but not in your own work. I just wondered if there were a tale, a novel, a film or a series that for you, encapsulates good, sinister tale telling.
Yeah, I think the book for me that I think about, and I've read several times, is The Little Stranger by Sarah Waters, which I just found so scary. I mean, it was really quite pathetic. I finished it, or I was reading it one night in bed years ago. My husband was next to me. My two children are just down the corridor. And I was absolutely rigid with terror and couldn't go to sleep. The whole house is asleep apart from me, just from the words on the page. And there's something really kind of marvelous about that as well, that she was able to do that to my brain through her, I think she's an absolute genius. And that book for me is just absolutely perfect. It really is. And not so much in terms of aspiration, because I don't think I could ever, I don't think I'd even necessarily want to go as dark as these books, but I on my course I talk loads about The Silence of the Lambs, because it's just an absolute work of genius, I think, in terms of the story and the characters and the feel of the whole thing. It's absolutely brilliant. So yeah, I think those two would definitely have to be on my top spooky list.
Thank you for sharing that with us. But let's come back to your writing. And no, again, just like with children, won't ask you to say, although I know you did say that you particularly like The Whisper House. But I understand why. But in the creation of this novel, is there any particular aspect that, and you looking back now at it, that you could go, God, did I do that? that surprises you, that you created, that you're really proud of, or that you surprised yourself that you were able to create that feeling, that character, that scenario?
I think in the sense that I wanted to come, there's a certain scene relatively early on in the book where Rose is called around yet again. she thinks she's been called by Gregory. She doesn't quite know what's happened because they're all denying that anyone's rung her. And there's something going on with the neighbour, and she wants to check that Gregory's okay. And parents are very cross and not paying much attention to anything. And she goes upstairs to go and use the loo, and it's the first time she's been upstairs in the house. And she hears a strange noise coming from one of the rooms and goes in and witnesses something incredibly odd. And I did really love writing that. I tried to think of something just so odd and spooky and unsettling. And I think, from the way that you asked that question, I think I sort of was a bit taken by surprise by that. I was kind of like, oh, really excited by that bit. So yeah, that's one of my favorite bits of the book, actually.
Yeah, because it makes me think of great tennis players, athletes, footballers, where oh my God, that goal, I'm good, but that goal was amazing. Or how did I manage that shot? I've been trying this shot for ages and it's worked. That feeling.
Yeah, I don't very often feel that. I think I'm too self-critical to feel that very often. But yeah, maybe the odd moment.
I'm going to go back and read that now with great relish and thinking, so that's the bit. Yeah. The development of Rose in this book again. What did you want to do, or did you know what you wanted to do with her in book 2 to lead her to book 3, or was it as you went along she developed in the way that she did in this?
Well, I sort of had there's a backstory to her childhood that needs to emerge, because her mother sort of disappeared from her life at a very young age, and she was brought up by the grandmother, and her mother was never really been spoken about, and there's all this little bit of oddness, and she discovers there's actually something a little bit more to it than she thought in book 2. And I had written almost to the end of that first draft when I had the idea I needed to end the book on quite a big cliffhanger, which I'm hoping some people won't get cross with me for. And I wrote quickly to my agent and I said, do I dare do this? And he said, no, I think that would be a cracking ending. I think you should do it. So that didn't come to me until quite late on. I think there would have been much more of a conclusion to something had I not realized it would be a nice jumping off point into the final book, I think. So I think in that sense, yeah, developed as I went.
You've just said something extremely bittersweet there, because it's great to know that there's going to be a third book, but you're telling us that it's a trilogy. And
well, we don't completely know.
Good.
Yeah,
good.
It is possible that there might be a fourth. This is something that I have got an idea that's on the back burner. So it was never. I haven't finished it. I haven't tied everything off in book 3.
Okay.
So I've deliberately left things open because I would like to write another one at some point. Publishing is a very, very slow business, and Whisper House has only just come out.
Yes.
And so it's going to be another year until book 3 comes out, and then that'll be a whole period of time. So it would be a long way down the line anyway, before there'd be another one. But
yeah. And forgive me for being terribly greedy. The amount of time and effort that as an author that you put into the creation of a book, and I think the problem for those of us that are readers, and we devour these things, and it's like, please come and have some more.
Hurry up. Yeah, no, I feel the same. I'm the same as a reader. I think, well, why does it take so long? But part of it is the publishing process, to be honest, and it's publishers having slots in their schedule for when.
Of course. Yeah,
that's a big part of it that I hadn't really properly appreciated until I was published by such a huge publishing company as I am, HarperCollins.
And it's tricky. It's tricky, isn't it? Because it's it's great to have that support behind. And
yes, it is. Yeah,
amazing. But of course, as you say, it's that, well, there's a cycle, there's a timetable for this, and just
yeah. I'm one little fish in a pond full of very many fish.
I'm just really grateful that that your books are being published by a company that can shout out about it, but also I get the chance to be here and talk to you about. a character that I think if people haven't got to know Rose Gifford, I think they should, with her special brand of investigation. And just that character, they often say, do they not, having an investigator, a detective who isn't perfect, we like that. But, there are lots and lots of tropes now that are there that we're really familiar with. And I think, you've provided us with a character with a background that, as you say, is tricky. And is something that she carries. It weighs heavy upon her.
It does,
But it's just I'm longing to see what you do next with her. Please forgive me for pushing there on.
I'm just about to do the structural edit part of the whole process on that book, so I've got to make quite a few changes, but my editor's been brilliant. She's pointed out things that I couldn't see, and I think, oh yes, of course, that's what I need to do. So it's the very best kind of edit in that sense.
And for anybody, let's finish on this if we can. For anybody who were to say, oh no, that kind of blending things together, it's not for me. So not an elevator pitch, but just to say to people, give this a go because.
Well, the simplest thing I can say is because I've had a huge number of reviews of people who say this is not my sort of thing, but actually I really loved it, which has been a massive compliment. It's made me really happy, actually. And the number of, if you look at the reviews, the number that start off, when I picked this up, I thought, well, this is not going to be my sort of book because I don't like ghosty things or whatever. And then they've really got pulled in, and I think it's because I am really trying for this not to feel wildly unrealistic.
Yes.
I want this is very much the real one. It's quite tricky to pull off, but this is the real world. And it's that feeling that maybe this could happen. That little bit of doubt. It's that little bit of doubt for me. That's the space I'm writing in. And that's the thing that I think has lots of potential for good storytelling, I hope.
Yeah. I would say yes. But I'm biased. But I really, please, people who are watching, who are listening, if there is a book that you want to take a chance on, then I would say to you, let it be this one.
Oh, thank
you. Because I think, as people say, as you say about the reviews, people say, wouldn't normally go there, but I'm so glad I did. And I hope, viewers, listeners, I hope that you feel the same way when you have, had the experience of the Whisper House, let's call it that. Caroline C.S. Green, thank you so much for being with us. Wish you all the very best with this book and with Rose Gifford's trajectory. Yeah.
Thank you so much as well. Thank you.
An absolute pleasure, and look forward to meeting you in person in real life at some point.
Definitely. Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.